All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. We are here for the Kentucky Monthly Climate Perspective of Drought and Hydrologic Conditions for June of 2020. This is hosted by the State Climate Office of Kentucky, a division of the Kentucky Climate Center at Western Kentucky University. I am Megan Schargorodski of the Kentucky Climate Center, and the main presenter today will be Stuart Foster, who is a state climatologist. And we will also have Matt Dixon and John Strang from University of Kentucky. This webinar is presented in conjunction with the National Integrated Drought Information System and also with the Midwest Drought Early Warning System. We have many partners that come together to help make this presentation possible. Particularly of the Commonwealth of Kentucky and the University of Kentucky, Western Kentucky, and so forth. The next regularly scheduled webinar will be July 2nd, so just a little under a month away at the same time. Hopefully it doesn't interfere too much with the holiday schedule. If it does, please let us know and maybe we need to reschedule that. This webinar is being recorded and we are also working on an archive to present to you guys to be able to access whenever you need. We'll send out a link for this recording, but we'll also get information out regarding the archive. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass on to Stuart Foster, who will go ahead and with the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Megan. I appreciate that, and had to put that picture in on the last slide from our Mesonet camera in Todd County, and couldn't have gotten a much better sunset picture there. So anyway, I thought we'd share that. Also wanted to highlight again the Kentucky Drought and Hydrologic Impact Reporter that was developed, most of the work there with Chip Zimmer and the Kentucky Division of Water, but it's a partnership between Division of Water and Western Kentucky University here at the Kentucky Climate Center. We'll be doing some more work with this and doing some more marketing here in the future, but I think this is a key group to introduce this to and really encourage folks to download and utilize that. So we're starting to see some dryness developing in some places, so hopefully we won't need to use it a lot this year to report impacts, but encourage people to download that and be an active participant going forward. Okay, the outline for this month, pretty standard from what we try to do in terms of looking at our temperature and precipitation patterns, very recent, and then how that's reflected in terms of soil moisture, and then we go down the hydrologic system, soil moisture, stream flow, then drought and flooding issues that may or may not be relevant in a given month, highlight some impacts. And again, we kind of branch out a little bit, given I think the interest of the audience here. So we'll be talking a little bit more about the freeze, late season freeze that we had last year, or excuse me, last month, in terms of our report today, and appreciate Dr. Strang on the call for that. And then we'll get into outlooks going forward as we start to get look toward the summer season coming up, and then we'll summarize, have some time for questions and discussion. So got a couple photos over on the left from our station in Pulaski County, and we learned something last month, and that is that we've got an area there in our view shed from our camera that can be a water course. They had very heavy rainfall in that part of the state, and we really kind of captured some of that runoff and collection of water there from the heavy storm event on the 19th. So our precip maps this month, we had a little glitch in which I probably caused when I turned a computer off that was supposed to stay on. So anyway, we've got our 30, 60, and 90-day precipitation maps, but they don't include the radar precip estimates, so we usually blend those with our Mesonet observations. So the 30-day map, we can see basically an east-west kind of pattern. We had that kind of tongue of our storm track that came up from pretty much from the south to the north, even a little bit southeast to northwest, rather unusual pattern in some sense, and brought persistent and heavy rains through a portion of the state there in the eastern half, whereas precipitation on the western half was notably lower than that. And that really shows up also in the 60-day patterns, really dominated by what occurred over the last month, and in particular that one period of weather that was in the second half of May there. So we've got totals in the west that are up in the 8-9 inch range as you go to the Jackson Purchase area. As you then move up along the Ohio River, you see some totals that are a bit lower in the 5 inch to up to 8 inch range, and then moving on up the river past the Louisville area towards Cincinnati area, and you get up around 8 to 10, 11, 12 inches of precipitation and so forth. But a little bit drier there along the Ohio River and in that western half of the state. And again, that's something that 60 days, so we've been seeing that now for a little while. That 90-day map starts to smooth out a little bit, but again, you may recall that last month we were really emphasizing this kind of trend that where we had a lot more precipitation in the southeastern area, and then as you trended to the northwest, the amounts were lower. So you can still see a little bit of that remnant of that pattern here, influenced by that late May event that produced the heavy rainfalls that we talked about earlier. But otherwise, again, much lower amounts as you go toward the lower portions of the Ohio River Basin there. So now we take a look at those precipitation totals using radar estimated values as % of normal. So all of the yellowish shades, yellow to orange shades, are portions of the state and region that are below normal in terms of precipitation. So where you see the orange shading show up, which is very, very limited at this point, those are areas that have received only 50 to 75% of normal precipitation, and those only show up over the last 30-day period. So when we get over to the 60 and 90-day periods, we don't have any areas that have been prolonged at that, well below normal precipitation levels. But again, we are seeing some dryness start to develop in terms of precipitation totals across a pretty good part of the state. And again, if we were to take out that one event in May, we'd have a good bit more area there that had been dry. That dry area, if you go to the north, you'll note extends into southern Illinois and southern Indiana. So it's part of a larger region into the Midwest and the Mid-South, where we are starting to see a pocket of dryness, very early stages. Megan, go ahead with move on to the next slide. Temperature departures. This is an important part of the story here as we look at the below normal precipitation that we're starting to see. Temperatures have been running below normal for the last 30 days. And this really extends back farther than that. You may recall from last month's webinar. So the 30-day period, May 4th through June 2nd, if we look at the average maximum temperatures across the state and region, we can see that we're running anywhere from about 1 to 4 degrees below normal on the high temperatures. And the low temperatures, a little bit closer to normal, anywhere from around normal to maybe about 2 degrees below normal there. So the cooler than normal pattern along with the below normal precipitation is a combination that's pretty important for us. Modeled soil moisture and groundwater maps that we look at. Our soil moisture map, we've been seeing a lot of dark green there in the Midwest and Eastern US. We still do, but again, you can see that pocket there from Western Kentucky up through Indiana where we see some white shading. So we're in the kind of more normal percentiles for soil moisture. So again, that certainly doesn't mean that we're dry in any sense, but relative to the surrounding area, it's been a little bit drier in that region. And then looking a little bit more at the shallow groundwater, get a little more comprehensive view. Again, we remain quite wet across most of Kentucky and the region when we look at that. So again, those are models that especially in the case of the GRACE model, looking at remote sensing data and such. So now we'll move on and look at our actual observed soil moisture data from some of our mesonet stations. I swapped out one of our stations here, and usually we take a pretty balanced look across the state from east to west. But since we're seeing more dryness develop in the western half, I focused a little bit more on that region. So in the upper left, that's our station in Crittenden County, there in the lower portion of the Ohio Basin. And you can see we're looking at a 12-month period. So if you look at the recent time here over the last month or so, and then go back to the beginning, you can kind of get a sense of where we are today versus where we were last year about this time and going forward into the summer months. And you can see that even though it's been a little bit drier, soil moisture is about where it was last year, and all in all is in pretty good shape there. And that's the same story in the bottom left. The bottom left is Henderson County, again up along the river. So we're just kind of moving upstream a little bit from Crittenden County, and again you can start to see where we're getting a little bit of seasonal drawdown as expected, but not very much. And again, the cooler than normal temperatures, I think, are part of the story there. In the upper right is our station in Boone County, right across from Cincinnati. And that was part of that region that received heavy rainfall. And again, soil moisture in that area is in very, very good shape at this time. In the bottom right, we're looking at Hardin County up around Elizabethtown. And again, starting to see very little bit of decline, as we get into the warm season. But again, really across the board, our soil moisture conditions are pretty solid right now. Looking at the evaporative demand drought index becomes an important index as we get into the summer season. And again, I may have mentioned this last week, but we did a NASA Discover program project along with the Ohio River Forecast Center, Kentucky Climate Center, and National Centers for Environmental Information supported that, and really kind of focused on this index as probably the preferred index for really looking at short-term drought risk in our region. So as we talked before, this is looking at really the atmospheric demand or thirst for water. So it's if we look at an atmosphere that is warm temperatures but low humidity and breeze and lots of sunshine, those conditions would tend to create a high demand for water in the atmosphere, wanting to help to accelerate evapotranspiration. But again, we've had cooler than normal conditions across the region, and our highs have been more depressed than our lows. So that's consistent with the notion here that if we look at the 1 week eddy or the 1 month eddy on the right, in both cases we see that our values are in the essentially below normal in terms of atmospheric demand. So while it's been getting dry in terms of precipitation, soil moisture remains relatively plentiful for this time of year because the atmosphere has not been asking for a lot of moisture up to this point. Now, that's changed here a little bit in the last few days as we've seen some warmer temperatures and such, but we'll see the outlooks going forward and get an idea of what we might expect here through the remainder of the month and how that might relate to the evaporative demand. All right, Megan, next slide, please. 7-day average stream flows, we are getting back to more in the green category of normal. We've been running with most of the stations above normal to much above normal, but that's coming back down. And even the area on the 7-day stream flows that receive the very heavy precipitation totals, those are coming down into more normal categories. The gauge there for Bowling Green that stands out in the 90 or plus category of much above normal. My guess is that's an erroneous value there. I'm not quite sure what would support that. But in any case, it's an outlier compared to other measurements around the region. 28-day total or average stream flow gives us a little broader picture. And again, this is going to encompass that wet period a little bit better that shows up in the eastern part of the state. Plus, you may recall that our stream flows in the east had been running well above normal from the heavier precipitation totals that they had earlier in the year. So, so we still have on the 28-day average some heavy stream flows on the Kentucky Licking Rivers and so forth. But again, those are coming down, on their way down. Current flooding, really nothing to be concerned about across the state. We've had, we've had a good bit of flooding and flash flooding reports this year, including some over this past month, but they've tended to be pretty minor, though people that are affected by that would not consider them minor per se. But in the historical perspective, they have been rather minor. So a little bit of flooding concern on the lower Ohio and Mississippi basins there, but again, very, very minor. U.S. Drought Monitor updated today or released today, and really again shows our region of the country. If you look at Kentucky and then broaden out from there, no indication of drought conditions anywhere within the region. As we mentioned last month, you have to go to the Gulf Coast area to find a little bit of dryness there. That may get knocked out here over the next week or so. And then as we move to the west, we start to see some drought in parts of the southwest and a little bit more across the west, but very, very little extreme drought, no exceptional drought anywhere across the country at this time. And that's a good thing as we get into the summer months. Changes from last month, again, nothing major. Do have some intensification of the drought conditions developing a little bit farther out to our west, but no dramatic changes anywhere. And again, we'll see what this tropical storm might do to conditions here in the Gulf Coast area over the next week. Storm reports for the last 30 days had a little bit of variety. One thing we did not have were tornado reports. We had a number of storms that produced heavy rains and some wind, some minor wind damage in places, a little bit of hail. Storms on the 5th, there from Casey County, Pulaski County, Laurel County over to Knox County. The late season freeze that we're going to hear a little bit more about was a widespread event, mainly over the eastern half or eastern third of the state. Had some thunderstorms and hail damage, minor damage there in northeastern Kentucky on the 10th and the 11th. And then the event from the 17th to the 20th, had several days there where we had storms in different parts of the state, but pretty, for the most part, in the, from the northern tier of counties there along the Ohio River up towards Cincinnati, south from there down across the state. And then again on the 23rd to the 26th, after a couple-day break, we saw some more storms and heavy rains, but not quite the same intensity as the previous period. So most of the impacts there over the eastern half of the state, but other than that, that one stormy period, a fairly quiet month. So Megan, I'll send it back to you, and we'll see what we've got from our friends there at the University of Kentucky.
Thanks, Stu. Yeah, as he mentioned, we're going to go ahead and move to the agricultural section, agricultural impacts, with Matt Dixon and John Strang. So Matt, if you want to go ahead.
Thanks, Megan. Hope everyone's doing all right. To start off, as you may remember, Stu is just alluding to it a little bit, but from our last webinar, temperatures over the first half of May were well below normal. It was an extremely cool start to May here in Kentucky. At the time, we were talking about record-breaking forecast lows on the morning of May 9th, and unfortunately, that became reality. So much of the state dipped into the upper 20s to middle 30s that night. You can see all those numbers on the map on the left of all the Kentucky mesonet stations across the state. You might see down there in southeastern Kentucky, Harlan County, it sits at 21 degrees, but I will say that's always been a notorious cold spot here in the state. Luckily, though, looking back at our forecast numbers, quite a few people had middle 20s across the eastern half of the state, middle to upper 20s, and good thing we didn't verify those numbers. It mainly stayed in those upper 20s and increased farther to the west. So still, though, this makes at least two impactful spring freezes this year if we include the one in the middle of April. So in the end, winter wheat seemed to be most susceptible at the time. We talked about this on the last webinar. Dr. Carrie Knott went over much of the freeze impacts related to winter wheat in her 2020 Winter Wheat Virtual Field Day on May 12th. Considering this field day was just 3 days after the May freeze, most of the focus is on the April 15th freeze event, but she did go a little bit into the May event. She put together the map in the lower right-hand corner. You can see it shows mesonet locations across Kentucky that saw temperatures below 30 degrees for 2 hours or more. I mean, most of all these stations were below 30 degrees for 2 hours or more. So something we didn't want to see in regards to winter wheat. Damage is expected to wheat with temperatures of 30 degrees or less for 2 hours or more during heading, flowering, and grain fill. Maybe a little bit less for grain fill. At the time of this freeze, a crop report showed about 83% of winter wheat had headed. So we were expecting quite a bit of damage. It didn't quite pan out that way. In the picture to the right, Dr. Chad Lee with UK shows some of the damaged kernels from the freeze event, in which the kernels are shriveled and wrinkled. I believe he took these from a farm in Hardin County. I could be wrong about that, but ultimately, whenever you see this, it can result in low yields and test weight. Overall, though, damage was variable across the state. Most damage with this April event was across west central and north central Kentucky in April, but the concern with this event in May was more or less, as Stu was saying, the eastern half of the state as temperatures dipped below freezing. In April, Dr. Knott stated in her webinar that most of the plots at Princeton saw 10 to 15% damage to the heads, but some plots were up to 70%. Obviously, higher percentages in the lower lying parts of the field. But looking at the crop report associated with this freeze event here in May, wheat freeze damage was rated 3% severe, 12% moderate, 40% light, and 45% with no damage. And you can see this information in the table down there in the lower left-hand corner. I think something that we have to keep in mind when we're looking at these numbers is most winter wheat production is across western and west central Kentucky. and that area did avoid the lowest temperatures for this May event. So that is some good news. So so these percentages may be a little less than what was expected in the end. So the report also went on to state that most corn and beans avoided widespread damage. Alfalfa had similar numbers compared to winter wheat. You can see there in the table, 5% severe, 14% moderate, 36% light, and 45% with no damage. So ultimately, while grain crops seemed to make it through all right, I believe horticulture was another story. But Dr. Strang will talk about that in a bit. So if we can go to the next slide, that'd be awesome. So yeah, rainfall is a problem in May. For the most part, it wasn't the high accumulations, but mainly because of the consistent nature of the rainfall. Extended dry periods or breaks were far and few between. So widespread rains were common over the first few weeks of the month, highlighted by that round Stu talked about earlier on the 18th and 19th. As we got into the later stages of the month, we went into more of that summer-like pattern where we were getting isolated to scattered activity on a daily basis. So ultimately, it was just hard to get in the field. It was hard to plant. It was hard to cut hay. Also, it slowed tobacco being set. So May was somewhat of a hard month. So just to look a little bit deeper into this, I put a couple progress and condition tables from the Kentucky Crop Report on the slide, one from the week ending May 3rd and the other ending May 31st, this past Sunday. The slow planting progress can really be seen when looking at the current planting progress compared to the 5-year average. In early May, once again looking at that May 3rd table, Kentucky sat at 57% of corn planted, which was 16% ahead of the 5-year average of 41%. Beans were the same way with 25% in the ground, 19% ahead of the 5-year average. These are numbers we like to see, but we fast forward to the end of the month and both those percentages dropped significantly. While 86% of corn is now planted, we are now 5% behind the 5-year average. Beans are still ahead, but just barely 4% more than the 5-year average. I did highlight it, but you can see that setting tobacco is running well behind too. So you can look at that graph below, lower right-hand corner. That's been the case the entire planting season thus far. 2020 is the blue line, green is the 5-year average, and red is last year. So you can see 2020 is falling behind that curve consistently throughout this spring season. So all this is bad news. You can look at the tables again up above, and crop conditions is still running predominantly in the fair, good, and excellent category. So with that, next slide, please. So just to close, farmers really needed an extended stretch of dry weather to try and finish up planting and cutting hay. Looking for an opportunity to cut hay has been nearly non-existent during May. You really need a 3 to 4 day window to get the hay cut, baled, and stored. Luckily, the month ended with a couple dry days with sunny skies and low humidity. That carried into the first few days of June. I was looking at some data from Lexington, and there was only one other window in May with at least 4 days of dry weather. And then I pulled up Paducah and Bowling Green, and they actually did not see another 4-day window. So in the end, this dry period recently has been much welcomed. I'll be interested to see what the crop report has for planting progress as of next Monday. I would imagine it will take quite a jump. I've talked to several producers that put hay on the ground this past weekend. Everything lined up pretty well with dry conditions, sunny skies, and lower humidity. Dr. Jackson in the Department of Biosystems and Ag Engineering at UK is one of those producers. You can see a picture from his farm in Mercer County in the upper left-hand corner where they cut hay this past Sunday. They are currently putting in storage today before the rain comes through. Looks like producers in Scott County were following the same plan as I drove around yesterday. Saying that, I still did see quite a bit of hay left untouched. Hay cutting will continue throughout June. We will hope for some additional dry windows, but at this time of the year, we still need those periodic rounds of rain. It doesn't take long for plants to stress out when temperatures are in the 80s and 90s and go several days without rain. Stu talked a bit about the dry conditions starting to show up in western sections of the state, so this will be something to watch. Lastly, I included a tweet from Beth Wilson, a UK hort agent in Pulaski County. While not everyone is associated with grain crops, fruit, or vegetables, I'm sure most everyone has seen some of the impacts from the freezes this year. She shows one of her yellowwood trees has made 3 sets of leaves this spring. Once again, 3 sets of leaves. We definitely don't see this very often. I know I had a tree in my backyard that has had 2 sets. The Energy and Environmental Cabinet's Division of Forestry released a blog in the middle of May talking about this issue. And more or less, poplar and sycamore trees were most impacted in eastern Kentucky, while in western Kentucky, it was primarily the oak trees and low-lying spots. So they went on, they added that while the trees might be stressed, there might be a minor decline, they should come out fine. So this has been a weird May with the cooler temperatures to start off. It has turned into summer here recently. We have gotten a dry period, so hoping the rest of the planting season turns out all right. So with that, I'm going to turn back to you, Megan.
Okay, great. Now we'll move to John Strang, and he'll talk about some of the fruit and vegetable impacts from the recent freeze.
See here. Okay, we'll get the mute straight here. Let's take a look at the first growing degree day chart there, Megan. Okay, this is a chart that Matt put together for us. You can see on the y-axis growing degree days. These are hours above a base 50-degree temperature when plant growth takes place on a lot of plants. And you can see the x-axis is time up to May 14th. The dark black line is the 2020 season. The blue line is the 2007 season. This is the notorious Easter freeze that we had that wiped out all of our fruit crops. And I think what you can see from this graph is that we are running about 2 weeks or more later than normal in development, and we still froze out, which is a really unusual situation. Next slide, please, Megan. In looking at the state, we've talked about temperatures around the state. I've talked with growers around the state to see how their crops have been. And in the northern part of the state there in Boone, Campbell, and Kenton County, it got really cold. They froze out most everything up there. The northeast, they're around Moorhead and Rowan County, took all the apples out. In central Kentucky, we've got a few apples at our university farm, a few peaches, but it was pretty hard. You get down to Pulaski County, took out all the peaches. There's a few apples on some of the trees. It was a little warmer down in southeast Kentucky, there in Breathitt and maybe Letcher County, in Harlan County. That low temperature that Matt showed earlier, I think that's maybe a low elevation or something. But you know, our fruit are affected by elevation, and we tend to try to pick higher sites for fruit producers. We've got a full crop of fruit in, let's see, Nelson County, apples and peaches, so things look pretty good there. Down around Metcalfe County, we're getting into a little better blueberry production. In Warren County, Jackson's Orchard on a real high peak has a full crop of apples and peaches there, and pretty much mostly west of that, we've got full crops of about everything. But again, it depends on the site. If you're in a low site, you may have frosted out. Situation in Davies County, we've got a grower in Kentucky. He lost all of his peaches, has a few apples. Across the river, grower has a full crop of peaches. So it's highly variable. Let's take a look at the next slide. We'll start talking about some individual crops. This is a shot of some apple trees at our university farm. And if you look really hard on the picture on the left, you can see one apple on the tree. The problem is there aren't many apples on the trees. We've got a few varieties that are late bloomers like Rome and and maybe Gold Rush that have fairly decent crops on. But you can see a progression in the crops based on elevation at our university farm. And our farm is located at the highest spot in Lexington. We saw very little leaf damage or shoot damage on fruit trees. The picture on the right is out of my backyard on a wine crisp tree, and it had shoot damage from the freeze, but that's the only damage that I've seen in that respect. Next slide, Megan. Pears, I thought our pears had frozen out at the farm, and there's a few pears on the trees. You'll see the frost marking or the frost kisses on the pears for where the epidermis was lifted up on the fruit and then didn't heal down quite right. But mostly pears are pretty much gone in the central and eastern portion of the state. Next slide. Here we have peaches. You can see the picture here on the left is a little tiny peach. When you cut them open, you see the ovary area or the seed area is dead. There's nothing in there. And looking at the branch here on the right, we've got 3 larger peaches on there that didn't get the ovaries killed. And there's a lot of little peaches on there that have damaged ovaries. Most of those will probably drop off. Some of them may stay on the tree, but then fail to size up on the tree. Next slide, Megan. I put this in to point out that our growers are having a rough season, particularly in central and eastern Kentucky. They're dealing with the virus. They've had this freeze. And then the third thing we can do to hurt them is tell them that we don't have any fruit in the state. So in order to prevent a triple whammy, most of our growers are sourcing fruit from growers outside the state. So we will have fruit at these markets. If we advertise that there's no fruit, the consumers won't show up at these markets, and it'll be really tough on our growers. Next slide, Megan. We've got some persimmon and pawpaw pictures here. Both of those had their leaves damaged. These pictures were taken in the last couple of days. And on the left, we've got some persimmon trees, and those leaves were frozen back twice. This tree is slowly coming back. It's got some dead twigs on the tips of the tree there. Now, this is a Japanese American hybrid persimmon, which maybe isn't quite as hardy as some of our American persimmons, but they froze back too. On the right, we've got a pawpaw tree. I took the picture in the far right. That's a pawpaw flower. There's a few pawpaw flowers that are left. And if you look at the lower picture there, you can see a few little pawpaws that have set in the center of the picture there. Some of those will probably drop off the trees, but the pawpaw crop has been hurt substantially. Pawpaw is a native fruit crop, as are American persimmons in Kentucky. So they developed here. Next slide, Megan. Grapes are a different story. Here's a photo by James Ulrich in London, Kentucky, in Laurel County, and he put his sprinkler up and sprinkled his backyard vines and got his vines through the freeze without any damage. These are some lower pictures, are pictures of grapevines from our university farm. Sunbelt is an American type grape. It's an American grape. It's a much better choice than some of the other American grapes like Concord, because Concord doesn't ripen uniformly on the vine. You have green grapes and ripe grapes in the cluster at the same time. Sunbelt is a southern Concord type of fruit. You can see there's a few flower clusters on this, but grapes have 3 buds on them, a primary, secondary, and tertiary. And in some vines, the primary bud was killed. Some vines, the primary and secondary buds were killed. And so we've got a variation in development on these buds on the vine. And what that's going to do is it's going to produce fruit that ripen up later in the season. And then you're going to have a second wave of fruit that ripen on the vine. So you can't go through and pick all the fruit this year all at once. The vine on the right is Noyer. That's a American French hybrid or hybrid grape. They have a little bit of a different bud situation. They're more fruitful from their buds. You can see some flower clusters sticking up there, but it's still not a full fruit crop. We're going to have a reduced grapefruit crop this year. The vinifera type grapes, which we have a few of in Western Kentucky, are probably okay in Western Kentucky, but if you had any in Central Kentucky, they got hurt pretty severely. Next slide, please. These are blackberries. The ones on the left are erect thornless blackberries, and a lot of home growers think they've got blackberries. If you look at that top picture, you can see the little dead center in the flower. The ovary has been killed on that, and so that flower will not develop any fruit. And the picture down on the lower left shows that the blackberries haven't developed. The berries haven't developed. Up in the upper right, you can see a flower in the center that has been killed, but the 4 flowers surrounding it are good. They will go ahead and set fruit. The picture just below that has a berry that's developing. All the drupelets have been pollinated, and we've got some other berries that are in the bud stage that will be alive and go ahead and set fruit. The bottom one I put in to show you that we have some blackberries that have pink flowers too that are very attractive. Now, the blackberries that produce flowers early are generally the earlier producing varieties. They got hit a little harder than some of the later producing varieties. And when the later producing varieties produce fruit, those fruit are a little bit more exposed to spotted winged Drosophila, which is a fruit fly that lays eggs in the fruit. So the growers will need to be spraying for those. Next slide. Raspberries, we've got June-bearing raspberries here on the left. We've got a black raspberry up on the upper left, that's Jewel. And then in the lower portion, we've got some June-bearing ones. I believe that's Prelude. Some of these were burned back a little bit, but I expect them to go ahead and produce a crop. On the right, we have a fall or ever-bearing variety of raspberry. We're tending to get away from those because they have severe exposure to spotted winged Drosophila, but typically in the past, we just mowed those off at ground level and just harvested the fall crop, so they would be unaffected by the freeze. Next slide. Here we have blueberries, and the injury on blueberry plants depends on the location and the variety. Some of the early maturing varieties, like you see on the left here, were hurt by the freeze substantially, and that's going to reduce their production. This plant on the right, this picture was taken, both of those pictures were taken yesterday, has pretty much a full crop on it. It's a later fruiting variety, and the blueberry growers are calling me and saying the blueberries aren't getting ripe on time. Well, the blueberries are not reading not paying attention to the text. They're a couple weeks later than normal. So based on the heat unit accumulations, fruit are going to ripen a little bit later. Next slide. Here we have some plasticulture strawberries, and if you're growing plasticulture strawberries, you know you've got to cover and protect them from freezes, because we have to do that every year because they are 2 to 3 weeks earlier than our matted row strawberries. Here's some shots of Joel Wilson's planting in Pulaski County down in Nancy, Kentucky, and he has done really well with his plasticulture strawberries, but he's paid attention to the weather and covered them up and done an outstanding job, and his sales have been exceptionally good. He has about 9 acres of strawberries. That's a lot of strawberries to move. Next slide. Here we have some matted row strawberries. This is a shot taken at our university farm. And you can see that we had a recorded temperature on the mesonet station, which is right next to this planting at 29.8 degrees Fahrenheit. We've got to remember that that's at a 5-foot height. So it was probably 26, 27 degrees Fahrenheit down on the ground. Matt was nice enough to come out on a Friday evening and help us pull the covers over the strawberries. We missed the covering for the April 15th freeze. It caught us unprepared, but we covered for the May 9th freeze the night before, and we put 2 covers over top of it. And you can see our covers weren't big enough to cover the guard row on the edge of the planting there. And you can see the upper left-hand picture is out of the guard row, and you can see all of those flowers have black centers to them. They were killed, and this is the same variety, and the just below that that was covered, and most of those flowers survived. We had a few injured ones, but by and large, most of the crop came through. Next slide. Here we have another shot of those. There's a couple photos that Matt took there. You can see this is Flavorfest strawberry here. That has a really nice fruit load. That's not a real early one, so we kept some of the primaries on that one. You can see some frost injured berries up on the left hand side there, where some of the pistils were killed. If we look at a strawberry flower, you can see all the little pistils that are attached to those little achenes, or what look like seeds on the strawberry there, and they all have to come through to produce a nice strawberry. Next slide. Our nut trees didn't fare so well in the colder areas. You can see a Chinese chestnut here. They were frosted back twice, and it took all the flowers off of them, so they're going to be foliage trees this year. Hickory, pecan, and black walnut were injured pretty much the same way. You can see in the upper right the dead leaves in there. That took out the buds with the pecans in that case. So this is a tougher year for the nut growers too. Next slide, please. Broccoli and cauliflower, we're getting a little bolting due to the low temperature exposures. Next slide. And then if you had warm season tomato crops out, or warm season crops like tomatoes or peppers or eggplants, if they weren't protected, they got frosted out, and the growers had to replant a lot of those. Next slide, please. One thing I want to point out is a lot of when all the nut tree flowers were killed in the woods in the colder areas, a lot of the acorn flowers were killed. This means a lot of that massed fruit in the woods is not going to be available this year. That means pest problems are going to be a lot tougher for growers. Deer will be looking a little harder at the corn. You can see the rabbits were chewing on the tree here, and birds are going to be a serious problem, I expect. It's important to get our crops netted, in this case blueberries up top there, prior to when the blueberries start coloring up, so that the birds don't know they're quite ripe. If the birds get a hold of ripe blueberries, they're a lot tougher to keep out. You can see in the backyard here some grapes that are bagged to keep the insects and diseases off, and there's some bird pecking on an apple. Our growers have to look at their crops, and for apple and peach and pear growers, to see if they've got enough fruit in there to make it worthwhile spraying. They spend a lot on sprays, and it may not be worth spraying for a few fruit. They may have to put some minimal sprays on to keep their trees alive, but our growers will have fruit this year at our roadside markets and so forth. So I think that's my last slide, Megan.
All right, thank you so much, John. That was very, very informative. And thank you again, Matt, for your information from the other side of agriculture. So now I'm going to toss it back to Stu Foster, and he's going to talk about the outlooks and what we have to look forward to.
All right, thanks, Megan. And yes, thanks to John and Matt there for some very valuable information passed along. So kind of going down the stretch here, 7-day quantitative precipitation forecast. We've got most of Kentucky in the area. We're expecting an inch to inch and a half of rain, something of that nature. Basically, you see the expected impact of Tropical Storm Cristobal is expected to come up through the Mississippi Valley and bring some moisture to Kentucky. Moisture that I think will be appreciated for the most part, although as Matt mentioned, we're still looking for those windows of dry days to be able to get out and do some field work and cut and put up hay. But anyway, that's the big story in terms of precipitation, and that's looking at 7-day total, but most of that's expected in the back end, toward the back end of that 7-day period. 6 to 10-day outlooks on precipitation and temperature. Expecting to see some troughing in the central U.S. With some below normal temperatures, more likely there in the plains, and maybe extending a little bit into Kentucky. So for the most part, we expect seasonable temperatures to maybe a little bit below normal after this recent warm period. And again, on the right side, with the impacts of the tropical storm, a good chance of above normal precipitation, particularly in the western half of Kentucky. 8 to 14-day outlook, we see that trough expected to kind of move eastward a little bit and look for the possibility of reverting back to a pattern of below normal temperatures. So we've got about a 50% chance of being below normal temperature-wise on that 8 to 14 day outlook. So we're getting into the middle of the month and beyond there. And along with that, you see some expected ridging in the central U.S., and that could be associated with enhanced likelihood of drier weather for us going forward. So again, for the most part, I think that's an outlook that a lot of people would appreciate at this point. So those, of course, are updated on a daily basis, the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day outlooks. So next we'll take a look at the monthly outlook, which was updated at the end of May. So that's pretty recent. Also, here we're looking at for the month as a whole. We just saw some areas and periods where we may expect some below normal temperatures, but for the month as a whole, expecting above normal temperatures to be more likely in the central plains and extending into Kentucky and really across most of the country. Again, a little bit of contradiction with some of that 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day outlooks, but again, those are not encompassing the entire month, and we've already been off to a warmer than normal start here the first few days of June. Month perspective, about equal chances on precipitation for Kentucky, 33% chance of near normal, 33% chance above, and 33% chance below normal. So no real strong signal precipitation-wise for our area. I always kind of look at that area to our south, and if it's wetter to our south, that's usually a good sign for us. And then the seasonal outlook through the summer months, expecting equal chances of above, near, or below normal temperatures through much of the Great Plains and into the Midwest, including parts of Kentucky. Otherwise, enhanced likelihood of above normal temperatures, and with the overall pattern again of warming temperatures globally, sort of the generic outlook is that we're more likely to be above normal temperature-wise. So they're just reflecting that trend. And then on the right, precipitation outlook over the summer, we've got a slightly enhanced probability of being above normal, a possibility of an active hurricane season. Tropical storms could contribute to that. And again, that's reflecting an ongoing pattern where we've had above normal precipitation for several years now. Again, mixed in with some dry spells here or there, but generally wet. So that's kind of the outlook going forward for the season. And Megan, we'll move on to the monthly stream flow outlook from our friends at the Ohio River Forecast Center there in Wilmington, Ohio, getting to the Ohio River Basin. And we're seeing normal to above normal stream flows forecast for the month. And again, that's really kind of trending downward from the above normal stream flows that we've been seeing over the recent period. Flood outlook, really no major concerns here. And again, we would expect as we're getting to the summer months that should not be problematic for us. But again, you never know. There are no guarantees. But a lot of green across the state. Wildfire outlook, again, last month we were in the below normal category. Now we've kind of bumped up to normal, but a lot of below normal to our south. So not a major concern at this point. So summarizing, we've seen some dryness starting to develop in western portions of the state, but the cooler than normal temperatures have led to lower atmospheric demand for water compared to what would be normal. Soil moisture then remains seasonably adequate across the state. Stream flows returning to levels typical of this time of year, with continuing decline in long-term flood risk. Really, our climate is kind of coming back toward more normal conditions. The biggest issues, as we've seen, have been associated with these freezing temperatures that caused a lot of damage for us. So after a warm start, the latter half of June expected to be cooler than normal. And Tropical Storm Cristobal is expected to bring some needed rainfall over the next week. We'll see how that plays out once we get a better handle on that storm track and timing. And then the summer seasonal outlook indicates an enhanced likelihood of warmer and wetter conditions relative to normal. So with that, Megan, I'll pass it back to you, and we can see whether we have any questions for anybody on the team here.
All right, thank you, Stu. Now we'll have a question and discussion session. If you have any questions, feel free to either type them into the chat box or unmute yourself, or we'll give just a minute for that, okay? All right, if there are no questions, thank you so much for attending today. Our next regularly scheduled webinar will be July 2nd at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central. And again, please let us know if that conflicts with your holiday schedule. It'll be available as well after the webinar is finished. On this screen, there are a few contacts. The three of the presenters today, Stu, Matt, and John, as well as Bill Caldwell and Chip Zimmer from the Kentucky Department of Water. And there is also a couple of links on the bottom part in the yellow box that includes links to the impact reporter and story map. So if there are no questions, I thank you again for your participation, and we will be emailing out the link to this presentation as soon as it's finished recording. Thank you so much and have a great day.